Great. Thanks, Kevin. Great introduction. I'm just going to end there. I think that's the highlight. Great start. Hey, thanks, folks, for taking time out of your day. My name is Eric Simone. I'm CEO of Clearblade here, based in Austin, Texas. You can see it's semi-sunny out here. Hey, listen, a brief background on myself. I'm a computer science nerd. Began my career at IBM in the late 80s, developing mainframe air traffic control systems and hospital systems. And now, gosh, 30 years later, I'm fortunate enough to be leading a team of much more talented programmers at Clearblade, building leading IoT software focused on asset monitoring in the transportation and facility spaces. Today, I'm going to talk about industrial IoT and the tracking of equipment for planes, trains, and critical assets with a few examples from our customers. So I hope you're all safe and well, given the current circumstances, sitting safely at home in your pajamas, listening to my soothing voice. I myself aren't wearing pants, but you can't see that. So with that TMI out of the way, let's go to the discussion of critical assets. So what are critical assets? Assets are things that a business owns that they care about, simply put. They are important items that they want to monitor. They want to know more about these critical assets. Things like, how is it performing? What is its location? Who is using the asset? Is it operational? Does it need maintenance? And so forth. Things in our ecosystem that we want to know about. The status of a slushy machine in my convenience stores, the location of my expensive pallets of essential oils, the location and status of oil tankers that have to go through dangerous waters in the Gulf, the status and location of workers on oil platforms, a very diverse set of critical assets and people to monitor. At Clearblade, we have experienced monitoring many types of industrial things like you see here on this slide. Industrial grade railroad crossings, mine dwelling slag haulers, locomotives and rail cars, oil wells, and at some point we've monitored all these things. So here are some examples of how our customers have configured our asset monitoring software to track their critical assets. Let's go that way. All right. So, planes. Our first example comes from a large aircraft manufacturer. The business need here is they need to track critical assets for maintaining grounded aircraft across the country. As you can imagine, aircraft sitting on the ground for long periods of time need to be properly maintained. Just think about your car these days sitting in the garage, not being driven. I mean, you have to do some maintenance on that to keep it running. So imagine a 747, right? This equipment is diverse. It's spread all across their facilities across the country, and they're using asset monitoring to do a number of things. First, they want to track the location of this equipment. Things move around. You've got blowers, you've got generators, you've got things as simple as standing workbenches that they need to maintain these aircraft. We need to get real-time information on the condition of some of this equipment, effectively repair and maintain the equipment, track the current and historical usage of the equipment. This results in massive savings within their business in many different ways. Better maintained and functioning aircraft, ready to go when it's needed, better usage of airplane maintenance equipment, more optimized, better purchasing and deployment decisions. Do I have too many of these assets? Do I have too few? What happens in an emergency? What happens in a crisis? So now let's talk about the next example in trains. So you see what I'm doing here, planes, trains. We'll get to John Candy later. This customer is tracking rail cars, and they're moving, they lease rail cars. Their business is the leasing of rail cars across various railway infrastructure. Their need is to track the location and usage of their rail cars more efficiently, so they can manage their inventory of rail cars, so they can invoice their customers on the time that the rail car has been used and leased. They can monitor the attributes and status of each rail car. Where are they? Obviously, like I said before, are they where they should be? Why is this rail car in Monterrey, Mexico, when it's supposed to be in Sudbury, Canada? Things like that. Is the rail car loaded or empty? Is it in use? Are the doors open or closed? Has the rail car been sitting idle? Maybe there's a maintenance issue. Is it damaged? As you can imagine, this information is critical to running their business, and having an asset monitoring system in place will save their business a significant amount of money. So these directly hit the bottom line. The next example is in oil wells. So this is a system not even built by Clearblade. It's our core system, but our partner, CoreValent, is in the business of building industrialized gateways for their customers. And they have a number of oil and gas customers in their ecosystem, and they've built an oil monitoring solution with the Clearblade software using our asset monitoring capabilities to sell a bundled solution, hardware and software, to their customers. The example here is they have oil wells, these customers typically sitting in remote locations that need to be predictively serviced and maintained. Having operational wellhead data will greatly increase the ability for them to do that. Alerting maintenance personnel when there's a problem, replenishing consumables before they run out, oil and other supplies that are needed. I guess oil for an oil well is weird, but replenishing those consumables, and again, the operational improvements that directly affect their business. So the next example, we're back into rail, and we're talking about rail crossings. Again, this rail customer is using asset monitoring to monitor all rail crossings to make sure they are operational for public safety and operational efficiency. As you can imagine, the rail industry is very serious about safety. Even one rail incident a year is one too many. Their need is to improve the safety of their 25,000 crossings across their rail network by monitoring key features of each crossing in real time. They're able to do things like monitor the status. Is the gate operational? Is it missing? Did someone blow through that gate and break it? Are the lights working? Is the battery backup charged in case of a power outage? Are the lights working? Are they bright enough? Is the battery charged, which we said? Things like that. Is the gate motor slowing down? Do I have to go out and predictively maintain this gate before it fails? Once again, this information is critical to running their business for improving public safety and reducing their liability on potential accidents. Another rail example next is rail switches. So these are the things that move the rail from one line to another. There's large switching centers in places like Chicago and other places. This rail customer wants to monitor and is monitoring their switches on their railway to prevent unexpected delays or, in worst case scenarios, train derailments. So the business need, again, is a safety issue, making sure their railway is safer to use, but also more efficient. A rail delay or rail stoppage is extremely expensive. More commonly, trains get delayed because these switches freeze, or they're obstructed by objects, or there's sand in the switch, and they can start to see bad things coming if they track the amperage across the switch. If it goes up, it's an indicator that the switch is harder to move. And now then an operator can be alerted to go out and maintain that switch before they have a failure. I really enjoy discussing the rail business. It's fascinating to me. I never thought I would know this much about rail, but it helps improve public safety and provide real value to all the rail businesses. So on to my last example, and it's monitoring people. And a lot of times when you think IoT, you don't think of people, but a big part of IoT is monitoring the safety and health of the people within my facilities, on my oil platforms, in my vehicles, things like that. So this customer's need is to create a personalized experience for the visitors to their facility. They want to make sure their customers are not waiting in line too long. They want to make sure that their certain areas aren't too crowded. They have an indoor ski slope. They want to make sure that is not overloaded. They want to make sure they have enough people enough service people and enough customer service people to go handle ticket lines. They're streaming location data from Wi-Fi connections, from BLE connections, and from cameras. So they have camera data from hundreds of cameras around this facility, and enables them to find out what areas are getting the most traffic? Why are my ticket lines too long? How do I fix that? Are there too many people in building B? Let's get some folks out there and move them into building C. Should we open up one of the rides for free? Do we have a safety problem? Is there a security problem? Is there a troubling situation? Where do I send my service personnel to better handle my visitor flow? This foot traffic data can also be supplied to their other customers, which are the tenants of this mall. Now, obviously, these malls are empty these days, and it's even more critical once the world gets back to business and being personally around each other, that they're able to provide that customer experience that people want. So, and this is just a start. They're starting with the personal customer service, but they also want to manage their HVAC. They want to manage their parking spaces. They want to manage water pumps for their water park, roller coasters, strollers, wheelchairs, et cetera. So IoT is just very diverse. There's lots of things that we want to monitor in these situations. So now let's get into a little bit of how do we do this with an asset monitoring capability that Clearblade has. So let's talk about the questions that these customers are asking. So, here's some questions that they can answer in real time to help their business operate more efficiently. One at the top of mind these days is, where are my ventilators, right? A hospital needs to know where my ventilators are. The country needs to know, where do we have stockpiles of ventilators? And hopefully through this crisis, we're able to do a better job of having the right equipment in case of emergency, right? This is also an asset monitoring and tracking problem. Where have my assets been historically? There's more than just where they are, but who's using my assets? Who should have my assets? Are they in the hands of the right people? Are they being used effectively? Are my assets underutilized or overutilized? Do I have too many of these assets, and should I invest elsewhere? Again, are they working and being maintained properly? Are my technicians using them properly? Are they breaking because they're doing something wrong? Do I have too many or too few of these things? This is a big factor in asset monitoring. Now, once we gather all this information on our assets, what do we do with it? How do we do more than just track things? We need to take action when certain events happen, right? So let's talk about the operational aspect of critical assets. So it's one thing to track and get alerted, but the business side, the OT side of IoT, is the ability to go out and repair an asset. If we can answer these questions more quickly, we can be more efficient in our businesses. How about invoicing? We talked about this earlier. If I know that I just shipped pipes to my oil drill and I can invoice the customer as they get used, I can have a more efficient turnaround time on revenue. I can also move assets to different locations if they're in an area where they're not secure. Maybe I've got assets walking off the job site and I need to lock them up. Or maybe I've got assets that are out in the air and they're rusting and I need to make sure that they're covered or moved to another location. How about the workforce thing again? I need to train my workforce to use these assets better. So I have to create alerts to say, hey, this group of assets is wearing out quicker than expected. Let's examine how the people are using them and train them in a different way. These are all operational sides of the business of IoT. So too many times, and me included, talk so much about the technology that we never really get to the real business problem. And we're fortunate enough now to be seeing the real business benefits from our customers. So it's not just technology. This is about the operational folks that work with these things. And often IT and OT don't see eye to eye. They don't typically interact, but these worlds are converging and both sides need to work together to improve the business efficiency. So shifting gears into technology a little bit, what does this technology actually do? How does Clearblade approach to solving this problem? So let's talk about assets in areas. More than just dots on a map, here are some of the asset details our customers are looking to track today. We've broken this down into 5 functional segments. The first 2 are these assets in areas. So if you think about what it is, it's all the stuff that we own, right? They're all our assets. My coat over there, my car, my towel, these are assets that I own. They are things that I want to track, things that are important to me. So in a business, things are important to a business, important enough to track and maintain and take care of. So if we create an asset type in a Clearblade system, I can now define what these assets do to me. I can put data in these assets. I can make these assets unique. I can move these assets around and have essentially a digital twin of this physical object in my system. So assets tend to move around. So typically we're going to have a location. So latitude, longitude, elevation, but more than just that. So I'm also going to want an XYZ coordinate in a facility. So an example of, say I've got an oil barrel that's being hauled by a truck. Well, I'm going to be looking at the GPS coordinates to where that truck is, where that oil barrel is. But once I get it into the factory or the warehouse, then I'm going to need, it's going to move around based on what pallet is it on, what shelf is it on, where is it being used, where is it being stored. So that's more the XYZ coordinate of internal tracking versus outside tracking. We have to do all these things in asset monitoring. And then secondly, it's the status of the object. And this varies object to object. You know, if I've got a rail car, like we talked about earlier, I'm going to be tracking its loaded weight, its empty weight, its door open or closed status, its axle status. If it's a motor, I want to track the RPMs. I'm going to track the torque, the fill level, the oil level. If it's a tank, I want to understand if it's got a cap or not, if it's open or closed, what is it carrying? What's the liquid type? Is it full? Is it empty? Is it partially empty? You name it. These are all attributes that get defined and change over time to represent this digital asset or this digital twin of a physical object. So now that we understand that the first two key components are assets and areas are things that contain assets. Now we go into a deeper level of understanding of what we can do with asset monitoring. So the next level, this is where things get exciting, is we can implement rules, events, and actions to act on these assets, to do something with it. It's one thing to gather data and watch things move. It's another to actually make them actionable, have them do something. So we can begin acting on these assets in a way that makes sense to the business, not to a programmer like me. If this, then that, greater than equals to, run this routine. We've got to be able to supply a no coding way for operational folks to fill in the information in business terms. So things like, when my tank level is below X, do Y. When this rule is satisfied, we trigger this event. So events can be, events have a life cycle. So I'm gonna steal this from my CTO because I love it. Think of simple action of ordering a pizza. So I order my Domino's pizza. And it has a life cycle. Pizza gets ordered, pizza gets stuck in the oven, pizza's done, pizza's on the delivery truck, pizza's at my house, pizza's in my belly, done, right? Now that whole life cycle of that event chain for that pizza is closed, because now that I've eaten it, I don't care about tracking that pizza anymore. The same is true with tracking a device or an asset that you care about within your business. This tank may hit a low level, and then now I've got to fill it up again, things like that. So not only do we run a life cycle, but we store the history of that life cycle so we can have an audit trail of what happened when to my items. And this is great data to store for feeding into large databases, for machine learning and AI, for tracking a problem, for tracking if there's some mistakes being made, all sorts of things. This historical information is important. And the last element here is actions. So again, you have events. Typically when an event happens, you're going to have to take action. And so typically this is simple as sending an email or an SMS message to a professional that says, this light needs replacing. This engine needs oil. And it can automatically create a work order by streaming that into our existing enterprise systems, things that you've had for decades, your SAPs, your IBM Maximos, your Service Maxes. We breathe new life into these systems by streaming this IoT data in and automating some of the workflow that's traditionally been manual or at least batched, right? So shifting gears again, I'd like to get into a short demonstration on asset monitoring. So I'm cheating. It's a video, but we only have a limited time, and this makes sure that I don't screw up. So this is Clearblade Asset Monitoring. And so I'm going to stream this, and we're entering a generic asset monitoring system. In this case, we're going to customize it to monitor tanks. So we give it a name, Tank Monitor, and then we need to describe the assets that we're tracking. So we're going to track, in this case, tanks. So barrels of sulfuric acid in this case. So we're going to give our label to tank and tanks. So it's the plural of tank. And then we're going to create areas. So these tanks are stored in plants. So we're going to create a plant and plants type, so we can now give life to these digital items and start to describe pieces of my business. So we submit that, and then we go in and start looking at how to monitor these items. So now we have a monitor of tanks and plants here, and we'll dive into creation of a new tank. So think of what I did earlier is we created a template of a tank. Now I'm creating an instance of many tanks. So in this case, I'm going to create a blue 200-gallon tank that has different features of it. It's got level, it's got temperature. Is it vital or not? What are the contents of my tank? In this case, sulfuric acid. Let's give it an ID. Let's give it a name. Let's give it a location. So I'm going to put this information in, and now I'm going to drill in to my location. We're going to zoom in here to Austin, Texas, and put this new blue 200-gallon tank right in to the location of Clearblade on 807 West Avenue. Apparently, Clearblade's changing its business model. We are going from software company to sulfuric acid producer. So I'm going to submit that. And now I've got tank 1 in zone 12, which is Clearblade. And I've got my first asset. So now let's go talk about the container for the asset, or the plant. So I'm going to describe a new plant, and it's going to be of type acid plant, and it's going to have an ID of Austin plant, and its name is going to be Austin acid plant. And I'm going to give it a location as well. This is going to be the Clearblade plant, which we've now requested from the city of Austin to rezone our area for acid chemical production. And we're going to apparently produce 800 barrels a day. So we're pretty efficient, even at production of sulfuric acid. My people are good. So now you get a little icon there. We got a pin on a map. And now we'll open up the big picture here, and we've got two assets that you'll see, a plant and a tank. So now what we're going to do is interact with these two things briefly and further describe features of our acid plant. So I'm going to dive into the acid plant again and view our plant details. And the nice thing about an area is we now get to define the dimensions of an area. So we're going to further enhance this digital twin and draw a polygon around the area of our plant. So obviously, Clearblade bought several blocks of downtown Austin to produce sulfuric acid, and now we've built a nice plant, and we're going to stick our barrels in there, right? So I'm going to cut to the chase here and get to how we apply rules to these things. So in this case, I'm creating a vital tank level check. If the blue gallon tank that is in my plant, the fill level drops below, say, 30 gallons, I want to alert my manager of the plant that's in charge of tank fill level to go do something. So we're going to give it a severity of 4. It's not very severe. It's not an emergency situation, but it's priority 1 because it's part of our business. And now I want to send an SMS to Mr. Aaron, who is the person that's in charge of keeping our sulfuric acid tank filled. So when this event happens, Aaron gets an alert that says, I must go to this tank and make sure it's filled and ready for shipment. So now you can start to see how these assets interact in a more complex way. So we'll drill into the tank. We see some gauges here. We're going to go hydrate this information and fill it and show that now that this tank has dropped below 12, I fired this rule that said, go contact our tank manager, Aaron, and it's an open ticket. And until he goes and fills this level or has one of his people do it, this is an open life cycle for this event. All right, that was a very quick asset monitoring demonstration. Hopefully it made sense. We do much longer ones normally, but I had limited time. So got a few minutes here. I got another slide. And real quickly, let's talk about the technology of asset monitoring. So it all starts with sensors and devices that are streaming data, both new sensors that are communicating over BLE, LoRa, Zigbee, or existing stuff that's been in my business for decades. That Allen Bradley machine, that Siemens machine that is connected via CAN bus, Modbus, BACnet, you name it. That all streams information to what we call the edge. Now you hear a lot about edge computing. I could talk for an hour just on edge computing. But let's just imagine that you've got many different protocols these things are speaking. Think of the edge as the Tower of Babel. It takes all this information and then makes it make sense in one language that we can then stream up to our asset monitoring system to apply those rules, to apply those integrations with enterprise systems. So if we take this raw data and diverse set of protocols, stream it to the edge, harden that data, groom that data, structure that data, send only the critical information up to our cloud or on-premise instance, then we trigger our rules and alerts into our configuration. The next step is to do visualization, show the pictures to the people and where things are and what the status is. Also feed our big data databases so we can do machine learning and AI, and then breathe new life into existing enterprise systems, that IBM Maximo, that BMC Remedy, that ServiceNow system, so we can automate our business further. This is the real exciting part of IoT. So look, this was a real quick overview of critical asset monitoring in a short amount of time. Hopefully you found it helpful. I don't know if we have time for Q&A, Kevin, but I'm available for one or two.